Official Tour 3 Part 2. The streets roared with activity when we exited the palace, shops opening up as many daylighters went about their business. It was even starting to get more and more sunny, even though the air bit at my fingertips. My smile grew wider, canines poking out of my lip. If this goes well, there will be other visits, I reminded myself, breathing in deeply. And then, things got well I'll let you decide. Molly. We aren't as fast as you are. Maiko laughed, running on my heels. Am I fast? I laughed. Or are you just slow? I mocked, slowing down a tad. Her footsteps halted, making me smirk. What is that supposed to mean? You know what I mean. I teased, you were always slower at the mile. I turned, crossing my arms. Her face was contorted in the most hilarious way possible for her. Ears seemingly puffed out, eyes narrowed and mouth pursed. You're a BTCH. She pointed, before walking back in front of me. I snickered, ruffling my hair. I clicked my heels, and popped my neck. That's one way to make her move. Jack laughed, patting me on the back. He stepped forward, tripped over a loose piece of concrete, and fell flat on his face. Wow, Raphael rolled his eyes, 2 people fell down on their face in the same day. I need new friends. He shook his head in shame, and stepped over and on Jack's back. The black-haired boy grunted, his mouth probably full of weeds. A scoff escaped my mouth, but I guess I wasn't really trying to bite it back. I hummed, sticking my hands in my jean pockets. They are here for an hour and they think they know the place. I sighed, biting my lip and pulling my leathery wings closer to my back to look like a jacket. Well then there's a reason to trick them. I squared my shoulders in confusion, surprised at what the owner of that wonderful voice just said. What? I turned my head to look over my shoulder, biting the inside of my cheek. Optimus was tilting his head incoherently down at me, and I couldn't help but imagining a smug smile on his faceplates. Well, Optimus continued, you are annoyed at them, correct? Aha. I drawled. Optimus shrugged, walking out into the alley. Then I don't see an excuse not to mess with them. Not too much, but enough to get their attention back. I nodded thoughtfully. It is October and it is custom in Animalia to make mischief during the Moonavone era. I bit my lip, smirking. Let the games begin, I chuckled, popping my knuckles. The bots walked up next to me as I strutted out into the open street. I know that face, Bulkhead exclaimed. What are you planning? I shrugged, my wings moving up with my shoulders. I have not decided. But I solemnly swear I'm up to no good. My smile widened. I am extremely proud of my Harry Potter references. I could see from the corner of my eye the bots looking at each other in confusion, except Optimus. From what I could tell, he was still looking down at me. I couldn't exactly see his optics, but I could already feel the blush creeping up my cheeks, so I looked away. The boulevard was as busy as it could be in the morning. Heck, even the tours were out and about. Breathing in deeply, the savory aroma of meat wafted through the air, combining with the sense of pastries, sweets, and other goods. Maybe even the slightest bit of flowers or citrus. The teens were walking ahead of us, totally unaware of the fact that they have no idea where they are going. I shook my head in impatience, and scanned the area. There was a feline balancing across a laundry line, knocking down clothespins into a basket. A wolf was packing up leaves into bags, most likely to sell in crystals. Along those lines, there was also a market owner flipping the open sign. Suddenly, a masked man flipped upside down into the marketer's face, scaring him. The market owner jumped back, before clutching his gut and laughing. I smiled at the playfulness of the citizens, my eyelids lowering a bit. All is well for now, Crash. What the hell? I yelled, squaring my shoulders. The familiar booming voice of an old friend bounced off the walls, shouting, Soldier! What have I told you about paying attention during the mischief moon? His tone was sharp, still containing remnants of his age. A giggle turns into a chortle, as I took notice of the patrol team hanging from the nets under a patio cover. A clash of fur, feathers, scales and skin was meshed together in the net, snouts poking out of the openings. "I can't believe this!" the voice yelled out again. A webbed claw surges out of the net, groping at the open air. "Miko! Jack! Raph!" I yelled ahead of us, "Get over here!" The teens are immediately by my side, tilting their heads. "Yes," they said together. I point at the netted soldiers, smirking. "See them?" I ask, grabbing Micah's shoulder. They all three nod. "Those," I smirk, "are castle guards. Even the mark clueless enough to fall into a prank." I glare into Raph's eyes, "Watch out." My hands then went to the sheath on my belt, and unlatched the sheath. I grasped the polished handle of my dagger, yanking it out of its scabbard. The sapphires embedded into the handle gleamed in the sun, and my arm drooped to my side. I approached the net, twisting the knife in my palm. "I wouldn't be surprised if anyone doesn't help us," a younger male voice claimed from deep within the core of the net, and it didn't look like there was anyone looking in my direction. My eyes glittered with an ego and smugness I had long forgotten, and I gripped the neck of the net. With a single slash, my blade chopped through the ropes, and the net plummeted to the ground. "Oaf!" The guards all grunted, toppling over each other. They groaned in unison, pushing off of each other. "See?" one growled, "I told you not to walk under the balcony." "But does anyone listen to me?" "No. Heck, if the Queen was here." "And she is," I finished, puffing my chest out and straightening my shoulders and back. Their expressions of stress quickly grew to ones mixed with fear and admiration. "Your Majesty!" they shouted, before kneeling down before me, fists over their hearts and their back. I smiled softly, sheathing my dagger. The only one with his head not bowed was the commander himself. "Sobek." "My queen," he purred, taking my hand in his claw. He bowed his head, and grazed the tip of his snout over my knuckles. They rested there for few seconds too long, and I could hear an almost silent growl coming from behind me. A glare pierced my back, and I feared if I turned, I would have to face those striking blue optics. "Sobek," I greeted, finally. His soft yellow eyes shinned in respect and praise, and I felt my heart beat a tad faster. "It has been some time," I slurred, keeping my hands in front of me. And what swept me off my toes was his laugh. It was deeper than I remember, and it tugged a string on my memory that I haven't felt in a long, long time. "It sure has, Molly." He smiled, his tail flicking, "It sure has." His hand fell to his side, resting on his sword sheath. I blushed harder when I realized our chests were almost touching. Sobek froze, looking down. If he didn't have scales, he would be blushing as well. We both looked at each in embarrassment, laughing nervously. I smiled coyly, and stepped back. The reptile in uniform rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes pointed in a different direction. "That's the Sobek I remember." My face seemed to glow in familiarity, before I noticed the soldiers still on their knees. "You may rise." I nodded at them, waving my hand in a graceful manner. They stood up on command, relaxing their shoulders and expressions. "So," I began, relaxing as well. "What are you all doing this early in the morn?" A faint accent pushed through those words, along with an old way of speaking that seemed like forever ago. Or heck, I'm even thinking like it. I cursed at myself, popping my thumb. It was as if something was triggered when I spoke, because the troop beside us went for their swords, pulling them halfway. Sobek turned as well, raising a claw. "At ease." He spoke calmly, something I have never seen in him. He was always shy and insecure, usually freaking out about something I was or wanted to do. I never noticed I was staring off into space. "Molly?" I shook myself out of my thoughts, huffing a small amount of air. Anyways, Sobek continued, we are on patrol for midnighters. His snout pulled up in vexation, his front teeth baring. A small gasp escaped my lips, followed by a growl. Midnighters? I snarled, how long? I searched his face, already knowing the answer. I growled again, cursing in traditional Animalian. He lowered his head, confirming my suspicions. It has been too long. I scowled, rubbing my knuckles. If they are here, then we are in major risk, I declared, speaking in a quieter voice. Ah, Molly? My spine straightened itself, and I turned on a dime. Maiko, Jack, Raph, Optimus and everyone else was staring in confusion. Oh. I drawled. Did I really forget that I am not alone? I thought, frowning. There was so much happening, I didn't realize I still had a group with me. Guys, I cleared my throat, motioning to Sobek. Meet Sobek. My second-in-command and childhood friend. Sobek, meet Maiko, Jack, Raphael, and the Autobots. Ratchet, Bumblebee, RC, Bulkhead, and Optimus. I motioned to them, sighing in exasperation. I looked back to Sobek, who, along with the troop, was gazing in interest at my friends. Realization hits them in the face with a fish. Murmurs swept through the soldiers, before they bowed at the waist, fist over heart and behind the back, and saluted. I giggled, my hand going to my mouth. I turned back to the Autobots, who looked, if possible, even more confused. Molly? Optimus asked, why are they saluting? I hummed, motioning my hand at the soldiers. Her Grace has spoke much about the Autobot team, one of the soldiers explained, a ginger tabby, and about how you are all great warriors in battle and extremely honorable, set on protecting Earth. Especially their leader, Optimus Prime. I froze, glaring at the cat. He grinned cheekily at me, obviously a newer recruit. I like him even more. I could feel a steady blush rise up to the surface of my face, which I tried to hide before. Molly. Maiko stepped beside me, you are on the verge of looking like a cherry tomato. I froze again, my hands falling limp. Seriously, Maiko. You're making it worse. I groaned. Also. She smirked, resting on my shoulder. Optimus seemed almost jealous when you were talking to your friend, Sobek. What? I freaked, messing with my hands. Yep. She popped, smirking, and you two did get seriously close. Did you and Sobek ever have a ... you know? I looked to the side and thought, biting my lip. I mean, I stammered, he was my first real crush ... So? Maiko nodded. Do you still have feelings for him? My mouth gaped, and I thought. I don't. He's just a friend. Just a friend. I answer, a really close friend that entered dance competitions with. I looked back to Maiko, who was rolling her eyes. Oh, shush. I laughed, pushing her. She giggled, gaining her balance back. The bots were making conversation with the party, Sobek and Optimus seemingly getting along. I have no idea. We better get moving. I butt in, stepping on Sobek's thick tail. He tried moving it, only to have it thump back onto the ground. Where are y'all heading? He asked, turning around to get his tail unstuck. I pulled his snout closer to me, turning his head. I was planning on heading to the archival building, then the labs and maybe down Bank Crescent. I whispered to him, I have a bookworm, a science freak and a guitarist on my back. I can't just be 2 plays behind. The reptile nodded, punching me in the shoulder. Well, when you get done with the tour, he laughed, maybe you can find some time to head down to the warehouse. After all, you're the only person able to beat me while sparring. He smirked, pulling his tail out from underneath me. Oh yeah? I smirk, jumping up to avoid the swishing bag of scales, but as always, I pulled his arm behind him while he wasn't watching, and shoved it behind his back. I am 1 step ahead of you. He grunted in annoyance. I smiled innocently, and let him go. "See ya round," I shout, walking away. "Pop rocks." "See ya, Snickers," I heard him call after me, before he moseyed along with his troop. I laughed at our nicknames, walking with more excitement down the streets. The buildings around us became more and more advanced, towering over the streets like crystals over a cavern. Literally, they were just spires and spires of crystal-polished skyscrapers along the skylines. And with more recent news, I was more aware of my surroundings. "Molly?" I turned to Optimus, my sharp eyes softening. "Yes." His face showed signs of concern and regard, but I felt the exact opposite. He began. "Who or what are the Midnighters?" The name made me clench my fists and I grind my teeth. A growl bellowed from the back of my throat, but I released it in a deep exhale. I bit my lip to keep myself from shouting out profanities, but heat of wrath was flashing through my wings in a flood of red. "The Midnighters," I replied in concealed anger, "are a severely large group of rebels who revoke the monarchy. They tear up cities, villages, council buildings, military bases, and other government facilities. They are violent extremists and want to see me disposed of and decrowned. But their main focus seems to be the council. By the stars, do they hate the council? Riots outside of the cities, shootings, murders of members of the lower privy council and vandalism. Nobody knows who their leader is, but we suspect it is somebody close in the government. And animalians do not take well to treason. So far, they wouldn't even come close to the capital, but now they have been sighted in the city." Optimus finishes, nodding in recognition. "Precisely," I agreed, "and if they so much as even harm one being in the city, they will have to hear it from me." I close my fist over an imaginary heart, picturing it being crushed in between my claws. My head rolled over punishments, and a disembodied laugh rung in my ears before dying out in a jumble of talking. "This place is so cool." Maiko jumped in glee, shaking her hands. "It is super advanced technology and buildings." Raph smiled, "Imagine what other advancements there are." I smiled in happiness, glad that the humans are impressed. They are, of course, the first humans in the city in 400 years. The mutants not included. But in amidst all this excitement that made my body glow, a feeling of dread stirred in my chest, pressing on my lungs and heart. I try to push the feeling back with thoughts of what is going on around me, but it lingers there like a fly over roadkill. "Dude. That building is huge." Jack's words pulled me from my morbid distress, and my eyes caught the looming shadow ahead of us. The Grand Saber Archival. Or more simply put, the library. The doors were made out of ancient oak, and there stood 4 gargoyles and 2 dragon statues on the sides of the entrance and roof. Enchanted, yes, but only come alive in times of need. "We're here." I smile, spreading my wings out a bit. A draft caught under the flesh, puffing them out. The feeling of cold air felt amazing on my scales and the skin. If only it felt like this in Jasper, I thought with a sigh, my hair blowing all over the place. The mark of the god of knowledge, Vima, was carved proudly in the doors. I approached the doors energetically, humming along the way. "Now, let's just see how Prime will react." I smirked, grabbing a lower handle of the door. I pushed inward. Now you might be wondering why almost all the doors are built to be pushed or pulled inward into the building. Who am I kidding? None of you are thinking that. But there is a reason that I will explain later. But anyways, moving along. The door opened up to the crystal-lighted hall with walls of plated silver. The place had an aura that radiated in welcoming warmth and smelled like maple. The hall went on for a few more yards, before opening up into a veil of glittering shadows. Glittering shadows. Something I wished I have never known. My heart jolted in remembrance of something unknown. I felt like crying in rage, in regret, in grief. I shook my head, gulping back a scream and tears. Why? I had no idea. By the light, I had no idea. It made me upset. But that isn't what we came there for. It wasn't what I wanted to come there for. I forced a smile among my face to calm myself, but my chest still stirred. Don't let that get to you. It's nothing. Well, maybe ask Kyra or Darkwing about it later. The veil of darkness lightened up as we got closer, and the feeling of warmth spread from my toes to my core. I'm going to put a wager on myself. How much am I willing to bet we are walking out of here with a bunch of scrolls and history books? I don't have that much money. I snickered, getting back into my usual attitude. It's odd how when you're in the place you grew up in, you act a lot differently. Like how I act way more maturely in the kingdom now than I do when I am alone. It is more so enchanting on the inside than the inside of the Queen's hoard. Curved timber beams stretched from the floor and supported the ceiling in a dome shape. Trees scattered amongst the walls and roots covered the sides. Thick and thin branches filled with sharp green leaves reached for the light of crystals above us. The tree bark themselves grew glowing crystals with a rainbow of colors ranging from bright chartreuse to pastel pink. Shelves and shelves of books stretched from one side of the room to another, and scrolls were held in the back of the room. Tables made from stumps were placed on the second floor, and ladders on wheels were placed in various locations. The scent of fresh autumn and books wafted from all areas, and the light was fairly dim. I breathed in the crisp air. Smelled like dusty paper and wisdom. How does wisdom smell like? Well, it smells like drying ink and molasses. No, you know. I heard a gasp of amazement, knowing exactly who it came from. The anime-eyed dork himself. I turned my head, smirking. I swear, there was those little highlights in Optimus optics that you see in Pokémon. Prime's jaw was dropped, and his blue optics were wide open like a child on Christmas. Told you you'd like it, I said with a smug look in my own green orbs. He walked to the side of me, his expression frozen in excitement. I smiled, flashing my teeth. Optimus? Ratchet questioned, walking up beside him. Are you all right? Ratchet, Optimus whispered. When I was Orion Pax, I dreamed of going to a place like this. This, he started waving his arms around, is my paradise. I laughed wholeheartedly, feeling a slight breeze come from an open window. Scanning Optimus' face, it was obvious he was anxious to just grab a whole bunch of books and plop down to read. As I said, well? I motioned forward, looking up at Optimus. Go ahead. I know you want to, you bookworm. It was as if Optimus won the lottery, because as I said those words, he zipped off into the hunt. He skidded on the soil-blanketed tile, turning into an aisle of scrolls and books. You are not going to be able to keep up with him, Ratchet urged, shaking his head. Yes, I will. No, you won't. I rolled my eyes, walking forward. Looking up, I saw the paintings on the ceiling. Thousands of small crystals made to look like stars, and cave-like murals danced around them, given life by the stardust emitted from each individual gem. Molly! Optimus yelled into the com. Probably should tell him that we can talk loudly here. And there's a reason for that too. I sighed, smiling while shaking my head. What Optimus? His head poked out from behind a shelf, smiling like a child. I can't reach this one scroll. Help. Air huffed out of my nose, and I giggled. I'm coming, Prime. I hummed in cheer, strutting over to the aisle. I turned the shelf, and a chortle escaped my throat. After just a few minutes, Optimus had a stack of books and scrolls balanced in his servos, his chin resting over the top one. Optimus! I shouted in disbelief, curling my fingers in my hair. How are we supposed to get these back to the castle? He tried to shrug, but that made the stack almost topple over. Shush, Molly. He scolded, we are in a library. Just get the one with the blue end. He smiled, tilting his helm up. I scoffed playfully, spreading my wings. I jumped up, thrusting myself upwards with my wings. I tried hard not to disturb any of the scrolls or books, knowing how old they were. The scroll wasn't too high up, maybe about 60 feet. Lapis lazuli handles, a gold cylinder with an engraved crest, and an attached note with the title. I took the note, reading the script. Illustratum? I gasped in surprise. The ink shimmered like oil under the stardust crystals. Optimus? I called down. Do you know what this scroll is about? I looked below me, glancing down at Optimus. He craned his helm up, gazing at me. He finally nodded his head excitingly. I have read on your laptop that Illustratum is one of the very few scrolls reaching back to your time of orifice. And I was interested when it was said that few have even dared reading it. I blinked a couple times, cradling the scroll close to my chest. There's a reason why few have dared to read it, I whispered, gliding back to his side. I circled Prime, before carefully setting the scroll in between two large books. Don't lose it, I urged, smiling softly. Optimus smiled back, nodding his head. I flashed my teeth, before flying back around the shelves. I landed in front of a tree with relatively large crystals. I crossed my arms, tapping my foot against a root, waiting for Optimus to stagger from behind the shelves and trip over a small rock. Oddly enough, he didn't stagger, but rather strutted with his huge tower of books and scrolls. They could have been buildings themselves. His helm poked from behind the stack, searching for me. His optics caught mine, and he smiled quirkily. You are so weird. I laughed, uncrossing my arms. He sauntered over to me, turning to look at me better. What can I say? He grinned. I like learning. He did the thing where you adjust your arms to get better grip on something. I still don't understand how he was able to carry all those books. Well, we can't have you walking around with those in your arms, I exclaimed. We have two other stops that are fairly far apart. I pursed my lips, the thump and patter of footsteps approaching behind me. Optimus? Ratchet shouted, raising his servos to his helm. Why? I want to learn more about animalian history. Optimus shouted back, childishly. Oh my, I giggled. Jack and Maiko started laughing as well at their, usually, silent and strong leader. Who knew he could be so enthusiastic? Maiko whispered, laughed into my ear. I whispered back. I sorta did. Maiko eyed me, raising an eyebrow. The bot loves Mortal Instruments. I answered her confused look. You should have seen him when Jace and Clary kissed in the first book. Maiko rolled her eyes, not interested in my fandom talk. But what can I say? Cassandra Clare got really close to the truth about the supernatural world. I smiled, putting a finger to my compiece. Iolaus? I called into the piece. My queen. Can you please come over to the archival building to take some books to my palace room? How many books? I looked back to Prime, who was tilting his head at Ratchet's complaints. Oh, just a couple. I lied, tightening my mouth. Of course, my queen. The male hung up, leaving me to laugh at Optimus as he tried to push Ratchet away from his stack. I scoffed, walking back to the group. I have a griffin coming over to take the books up to the palace. He should be here in a minute or two. I spoke. When he gets here, we can go ahead on the tour. Everybody nodded, Optimus bending down to set the books and scrolls on the ground. Your Majesty. That was quick. I laughed, turning towards the entrance. A medium-sized, tawny griffin with a cougar's body and a hawk's head waited at the door, bowing his head. Iolaus. I smiled. Thank you for coming to my aid. Of course. He smiled, raising his head. His yellow eyes scanned the area for a second, before sighing. I am guessing that those are the books. He raised a claw and pointed a talon at the stack. He frowned, his beak pursing. You said there were only a couple. I shrugged, smiling innocently. If I told you the truth, you wouldn't have come. Your Majesty, Aeolus laughed. I'd have to. He approached the books, and took a small pouch from his strap and opened it up. He took a pinch of the dust inside, and threw it onto the books. The dust immediately disappeared, but the books and scrolls aura glowed brighter, and soon enough, they were floating above the ground. By Aeolus! I waved, as he exited the building, the books and scrolls following him close behind. Okay, I smiled cheerfully, onto the next building. Time skip. We were back on the streets, heading towards the east side of the city. I'm guessing it was around 10 or 11 o'clock, and it started to smell almost like fast food. Chicken nuggets and French fries. I purred, wiping some drool off the corner of my lips. Huh, must be hungry, I thought, looking to the left. Didn't help that the street side was filled with restaurants. I narrowed my eyes, clenching my teeth. My hand went to my growling stomach, and I looked down at my belly. Why now? I whined, pouting. Something wrong, Molly? Optimus asked, looking down at me in concern. Either I am hungry or I have a parasite I'm eating for. I answered sarcastically, hoping it's the first one. I bit my lip, almost laughing. I reached down to my belt, moving my shirt out of my way. My fingers clutched a small pouch, much like my gold pouch, and unhooked it from the belt. I opened it up, the bag filled with small leaves. They looked like maple leaves, but seriously green. I picked one out, and tossed it into my food hole. Instantly, flavor burst onto my taste buds like tiny explosions. Waves of crisp, distinct flavors rushed around in my mouth as I chewed the Indian leaf like gum. I smiled, the leaf satisfying my hunger, surprisingly. Ugh, much better. I breathed, using my tongue to pick out the residue of the gummy leaf. I glanced back up, rolling my neck. Optimus was gazing down at me with interest. I stuck my tongue out like a cat would, acting stupid. I started singing in my head, daydreaming with the lyrics. I don't want to come back down. I don't want to touch the ground. I hummed the beat to it, my wings starting to blast in colors. Molly? I jumped, my wings flapping. What? I squeaked, blushing at my fright. What are you thinking about? Optimus laughed. I looked up and thought, random stuff. Why else would I stick out my tongue? A laugh shook my chest as I tried to contain it, my lungs hurting. Good point. He nodded in agreement. I smiled, my eyes creasing at the edges. My heart beat faster as I gazed at him, taking in any detail my eyes landed on. Oy vey, how is Jekyll going to take this? Another arson attempt, no doubt. Complaining about human and alien allies, burning down a Siberian village. Stars, why me? I scrunched up my nose in a snarl. Grrrrrrrr, Jekyll. Definition of tyranny. A growl bellowed in my chest, pressuring against my throat. I choked it back, taking deep breaths to calm myself. I couldn't cause alarm right now. But with all the stress from the Midnight Rebellion, Jekyll, weird internal mood swings, and stress from everything else, I could just take up Sobek's offer to spar in the warehouse. I snorted air out of my nose, smoke rising from my nostrils. I followed the wisps with my eyes as they floated into the midday air. I sighed in tension, my lower eyelid feeling like it was twitching. Raph! Stop tripping me! Maiko shouted, stumbling over the 12-year-old's foot. Then give in. He replied with a smirk, adjusting his glasses. Did I miss something? I asked, bounding to their sides. Raph wants me to give him 20% of my paycheck or buy him a computer program that costs my whole paycheck. Maiko yelled, pointing Raph. Raph took this to offense, his eyebrows furrowed together. Only because you refused to apologize for spilling the soap bucket over my head. Not my fault you were in the way. Raphael glared at Maiko, then looked away. Maiko, I said, apologize. She looked at me in disbelief, lowering her finger. Butts are for grapping. Anything after is grap too, I gruffly said, crossing my arms. Micah's mouth dropped, before she quickly sealed it shut. I blinked my eyes roughly, before directing my attention back onto the streets. Molly, not trying to be a hassle, RC started, walking next to me. But where exactly are we? Geographically? Eastern Russia, if you want the human name for it. I answered, sliding a hand into my jean pocket. I scanned the road for any street signs, and saw a general store. Okay, so we are on Coral Lane, and the labs are on Memorial Grove and Skeleton Yard. Then we should be getting close. I remembered. My breath hitched, my eyes filling with tears. Skeleton Yard ... skeleton ... I never realized that. I gulped, my wings growing darker. I started shivering uncontrollably, my jaw muscles clenching. They built it there on purpose. Remember? They built it there because of you. Mutagenics was created to study you. Stop shaking and get over yourself. I breathed out trapped air, and turned on the cross. The streets grew less active as we went down the boulevard, most people terrified of even coming within a 5-mile radius of this area. The street went more south, probably the most southern area in the city. It used to be much bigger. I thought out loud, looking around in mourning. What has? Optimus asked. I held back a sob and my eyes felt dry. The city. I confessed, it used to stretch for 20 miles. But then. I choked up, feeling a scream crush my lungs. I shook my head, making my face more serious. It's nothing. I finally stressed, clenching my hands. I ignored the whispers behind and beside me, and my eyes darted around, looking for here we are. I sparked, trying to make better. An even larger building showed up from behind a building, made out of not shiny steel with no windows. I almost started sprinting, if it wasn't for the reminder of the slowpokes behind me. Come on. I beamed. It was just a few yards. A few yards. The lab of the modification of mutagenics. Rebuilt, relocated, renamed, repurposed. All for the sake of a supposed princess and a burly man who desperately needed to shave. I smiled in nostalgia, looking back to those days as a toddler. Surprising how two traumatic events can make one remember everything from their past. We were in front of the glass doors, tinted so nobody could see inside from the outside. I made sure before opening the doors that everyone was with me, and walked onto the pressure-sensitive pads. The doors slid open with a hiss, 2 more doors behind them opening as well. All 4 of them were exceptionally tall, given their head scientists' size. When the last 2 doors slid open, the rest instantaneously fell silent. The entrance room was huge, with dozens of platforms and desks scattered everywhere. Actually, most of the desks were thrown on top of each other to create walls and barricades. There was a radio blasting Bohemian Rhapsody somewhere, and the walls, tile ... everything was white. Except one area, which was a rainbow of splattered paint. Interns were playing trash kit ball in the corner, and scientists were trying to avoid each other's paintballs. Never thought I'd see the day where they're actually doing something productive. I shrugged, watching the paint drench one intern in the back. And here we have the scientists and interns in their natural habitat. I joked, gesturing towards them. These, Ratchet scoffed, are your scientists? A fraction of them. They're on break. I walked a different direction, leaving the probably stressed out nerds to their fun. My shoes clacked against the tiles, echoing off the walls. The lab of the modification of mutagenics was originally titled the Defense Lab of the Explosion of Ethology, meaning they studied animal behavior. I informed, after the the Great Reaping, it was destroyed. It wasn't until 6 months later, when a man was arrested for holding the thought-dead princess, me, captive. When the man explained that he was protecting me, And what has happened over the last few months? The lab was rebuilt and dedicated to researching my and others' mutations, and their Caillou skeleton? I looked back to them, mainly Ratchet. Yes, I answered hesitantly. But over the years, different sectors of the lab has been dedicated to many other sciences, such as astrology, meteorology, physiology, ect. And to keep the machine running. We walked through the halls, before I spotted the large doors. "Ah!" I exclaimed, "here we are." I pressed a hand to a pad near the door, letting it scan my prints. It beeped green, and door lifted open. "Dusk?" I called into the room. My eyes scanned it for any sign of life, looking for the crazy doctor. "Are you here?" Bonk. A dark head shot up from under a desk, hitting a shelf that was stacked with junk. "Your Majesty," he groaned, rubbing his head with his gloved claw. I chuckled, "Hi, Dusk." His wings closed tightly, hiding the inner membrane. Dusk bowed his head, his faulty glamour shifting and distorting his left eye. "What brings you here, Molly?" he asked, his tail swishing behind him. I smiled, my wings taking some star imitations. "I wanted to show my friends around," I claimed, motioning to the bots and humans. They froze, waving nervously. "Great," Dusk chirped, "I don't have many visitors." He leapt onto a perch, shuffling through a shelf of books and boxes. He grabbed a small golden orb, examined it, then flew back down. "I was just looking for this," he hummed, setting it on a cluttered desk. His workspace was filled with crumpled pieces of paper, and the whiteboards behind him were filled with equations and expressions and charts and other things. "He's been mapping again." "Dusk," I smiled, motioning towards Ratchet, "Meet Ratchet. He's a scientist and a medic for the Autobot team stationed in Jasper." Ratchet froze, glaring at me. I glared back and mouthed, "Don't whine." Dusk smiled, lowering his snout in greeting. "Pleasure to make your acquaintance," Dusk greeted, sticking out his right hand for Ratchet to shake. The old bot looked skeptical, before taking the gesture. "Pleasure is mine." He nodded, shaking Dusk's claw. As a fellow medical officer and head scientist here at the labs, Dusk backed away, bowing low. "I welcome you to our facility." He raised his head, folding his wings closer to his body. "Say," he questioned, "you wouldn't happen to know how to fix a primary optical nerve with sustained prosthetic blood circulation?" His right eye glimmered in hope, the yellow almost turning brighter. "Please," Ratchet scoffed, waving his hand. "Good," I heard Dusk sigh. "Poor thing." I pouted, sympathetically. The discolored Nightwing turned away, pushing a button on the table. The left side of his body glowed, before the glamour disappeared. The sound of gears and electronics whirred, and he turned. His whole left side of his body stretching down to his wings was all machinery. A dim glow came from the optic, and his snout metal was poorly polished. He pulled his glove off, revealing his left arm, fully robotic, tiny parts making up synthetic muscles and joints. His shoulders were partially metal, stretching up halfway to his wing's first joint. The bots gasped, faces full of sympathy. "How did this?" Ratchet started, examining Dusk's prosthetics. "I was exposed to massive amounts of Caillou radiation during the attack. Burned off the scales of my face, my wing, my neck, and all the way to my waist. I couldn't save my arm," he explained, nervously. His metal claw went to his left optic, gently pressing a button that should be his tear duct. The glow went out, and the robot eye popped out of the synthetic socket, a tiny orb of gunmetal silver. "I haven't been able to see out of it for days," Dusk explained. "I can't fix it though. Don't have enough experience with cyborganic parts. Think you could?" He held it out for Ratchet to look. Ratchet started, "It looks like it needs a few calibrations. The electric pulse wire seems to be exposed, and the calibration segments look like they are stuck in a position, and the central nerve could use some fixing." Ratchet nodded at his conclusion, crossing his arms. Is that so? Dusk hummed, looking at it with his good eye. If that is the case, then I believe my lower counterpart, Meridian, could fix this. Might as well send it to her. I smiled, and glanced back to the whiteboards. Dusk? I questioned in concern, have you been tracking them again? Duskbreaker looked away in guilt. Yes. But I can't help it, Your Majesty. My fur there is out there, and I want answers. He stomped his flesh claw, his wings ruffling. He grabbed the gold orb, messing with it. I have to know. Your father? I turned, seeing Raph walk up. What happened to him? Dusk breathed out, slumping his shoulders. He left my mother when I was an egg. He sighed. She was very sick? Didn't make to my first hatch day. He downcasted his eye, his smile disappearing. Why are you tracking them through space? Bulkhead asked, looking at the maps on the wall. That's easy. Dusk smiled, spreading his wings. They had rusty clouds of dark matter swirling in the membrane, surrounded by an off-white cloud. The back color was black, sprinkled with stars. I'm a hybrid. Part Nightwing, part spacing. He folded them up again, but not as much. This sphere, he hummed, twisting the golden globe in his claw, is the only thing I have of my father. He started pressing round indentions in the sphere, twisting the halves and separations. It opened up, a bundle of stars scattering across the room. Galaxies upon masses swirling around in one room, stars shining bright through black. Wow! Jack breathed, looking up in awe. In fact, everyone was awestruck, even me. The space was sucked back into the orb, and it closed. I don't know what it is, he smiled, but it must have been important. I nodded my head, and looked at my watch. I believe it might be time for us to leave. I exclaimed, tapping the covering. Bye, Dusk. We exited the labs, greeted by the sun and chilly air. Everyone was back to talking, while I was leading the group. So along with A.A's, Raph grinned, you also have been able to graft robotic prosthetics that work. Your kingdom is far more advanced than human society. I smirked. Well, of course. I turned my nose up, smiling egotistically. How else would we have won the war? What war? The humans said in unison, jogging to my side. My face went blank, and I glanced back to Optimus. I'll explain later. I gulped, looking away. My stomach growled once more, making me huff in annoyance. Right now, I'm trying to find a place to eat. The streets filled up with life as we got off of the dead street, radiation levels lowering. So far, I could only find stores and shops, not any of the restaurants I was looking for. Seafood? Nah. Asian? Nope. English? Nada. Where is it? I frowned, searching for the sister location of Club Euphoria, the biggest nightclub chain in the world, only 2 open at a time. And one is always open here in Animalia. Molly? Jack asked, poking my shoulder. My mom is going to be worried if we don't get home soon. When do we expect to leave? Maiko and Raph nodded, but I laughed it off. Where we are, I explained, we are in the next day. If we were in Jasper, I'll just tell your parents that we are spending an all-nighter at my house. The teens grinned excitingly at this, realizing that they weren't leaving till morning. Awesome. Cool. Spastastic. I flashed my teeth, and flew upwards. I twirled in the air, before landing Optimus's shoulder. Sup, Prime. I said, coolly, sitting down. Hello, Molly. He smiled back in reply, gazing at me softly. Is everything all right? Why wouldn't it be? I beamed, resting my wings on his back plating. Is there something wrong with just trying to hang out with my favorite bot? I purred, resting my elbow on my knee and my chin on my palm. He froze, and I could hear a quickening in the whir of his inner mechanics. He started to heat up, before forcing his vents on. I cooed, smirking. Before he could open his mouth, I flew back down to the teens. My feet grazed the ground, before plopping down onto the asphalt-like surface. "What are you trying to do?" Micah whispered into my ear, arching an eyebrow. "Just wait," I assured, smirking while looking back behind me through the corner of my eye. "Just wait. I know what I am doing." I nodded at my own claim, closing my wings tightly against my back. I turned the corner at the stoplight, waving at a couple of subjects who greeted me along the way. I could hear the pounding of music as I turned to see the sign telling us the street. Bank Crescent. Finally. I grinned, walking a bit faster. "Who wants lunch?" I asked Miko and the two boys. They raised their hands high into the air, and I laughed. "Let's go then." I waved forward, getting closer to 9 Lives. I hurried to the door, trying to get there before them to enter in the amount of people into the congruent size regulator. Name. The pad says on the screen, a box below the command. Molly Pavlis. The screen bleeped, automatically going to the guest number. I typed in 8, waiting for a confirmation. The screen bleeped again, turning green. I smiled, turning to face the streets. The group walked in front of the bar doors, looking at me in confusion. "Just stay here," I said, raising my arms. I shook my head, before bounding into the bar. Lights flashed in the building, the tavern having a New York look to it. The bartender was shaking a flask of, I'm guessing, alcohol, doing tricks with it as he poured it into a glass. "Seth!" I yelled over the blasting music and endless chatter. The bartender's head perked up, his mustache twitching. "Molly." The middle-aged man ran from behind the counter, his legs moving incredibly fast. "Surprised to see you here," he said calmly, popping his neck. I grinned back, putting a hand on my hip. "This place is packed," I hummed, looking around. "Yeah," he laughed, ruffling his hair. "It's rush hour. Anyways, how have you been?" "Good, but hey, can you do me a favor?" "Course." The human hybrid nodded, "Anything for my paid singer." "Good, 'cause I need 4 things of hamburgers, 3 glacier water bottles and 3 large fries." I walk out with a bag of food, and stopped. I looked around, not seeing the rest. Guys? "Molly, we're back here," Jack shouted, sniffing the air as he turned the corner. "Food." I rolled my eyes, before walking around. The bots were lounging on a bench for larger residents, and Miko and Raphael were arm wrestling. Optimus was tapping his pit impatiently, mumbling stuff to Ratchet. I cleared my throat, gaining everyone's attention. Optimus perked up like a puppy, his optics adjusting. "I got grub." I smirked, waving the bag in the air. "Yay." We were still walking around the city, Miko still starstruck. "That dude was hot," she purred, rolling her shoulders. "You said that about everyone." I laughed, punching her in the shoulder. "Because they were." We both giggled, walking away from the long road. The sky got redder and darker, the sun starting to set over the skyline. HMMPH. I breathed, smiling. "Looks like it's time to head back to the castle." Miko nodded, dragging Jack by the back of his shirt for punishment. He ate the rest of her fries she was saving for later. "Can you let me go now?" he asked, crossing his arms. "No." Jack huffed, slumping into her grip. I laughed again, guiding everyone back to the castle. It took less time to get back to the castle than getting there before. It was like everyone was happy to be back in the room. I saw the dogs sleeping in the fire cavern while we were walking by it, and the guards were playing poker on the floor. "Look alive, boys," I ordered, making them jump. When we went back into the room, there was singing coming from my chambers. "Is somebody else here?" Raph asked, hiding behind me. I shook my head, recognizing their voices. I approached the doors, pushing it lightly. 9 dragons were lounging about in the room, singing. Or, 2 of them were. I wish that I could be like the cool kids Stingray sang with Hibiscus, enjoying themselves. Dune, as always, was rummaging through the fridge for food, and Garnet was trying to ignore everybody. Eclipse was reading a spell book, and Hale, Grove, and Dark Tort were playing Uno. Attack with Draco. No fair. Draco huffed, getting spatted at with cards. You're bad at this, Uncle Draco. Hale claimed, putting a red 7 on the stack. Really bad. Agreed Grove, putting a yellow 7 down. Good evening, kids. I greeted, walking into the room. Heads turned towards me, and I was tackled to the floor by 6 flying dragonets. Mum. I fell down, toppled over by the younglings. I can't believe you're home. Mum. Mum. Guess what happened at school? I wanted to tell her. Too bad. Kids, I chuckled, sitting up. Let me get up first. They crawled off of me, sitting down impatiently. I stood up, wobbling on my toes. I tried to use my wings to regain balance, but ended up going flat-foot. Now, I smiled, dusting my shirt off, what about school? Dune and Grove smiled widely, yelling at the same time Garnet got into a fight. Chat? My head jerked to the red skywing, glaring at my daughter. She was turning away from us, mumbling about how they were snitches. Garnet. I growled, stepping forwards. It was nothing, Mum. She snarled, her ruff flaring. What happened? It's nothing. Garnet. Draco yelled, tell your mother what happened in class. The scarlet dragon growled under breath, smoke rising from her nose. Garnet. She hissed, curling up into a ball. A slam echoed through the room, making us jerk up. Eclipse was standing up, violet eyes glowing deeply. Her book was on the ground. She was defending a blind dragonet. She explained in my head, lowering her wings. Why? Garnet takes after you, like all of us. Eclipse nodded deeply, doesn't take bullying very well. I hummed, looking back at Garnet. The room was so silent, you could hear a fly buzzing in the next room. Honey. I cooed, walking to her. I stroked her spines, trying to soothe her. Go to your chambers, we'll talk about this tomorrow. Her neck raised, her snout lowered. Garnet sighed in relief, before standing up. She turned, flaring her wings. Her eyes narrowed, but softened quickly. Good night, Mother. She whispered into my ear, nuzzling into my neck. I sighed as well, watching her walk out of my chambers. The bots backed away, the humans hiding behind their legs. Eclipse blinked, before lying back down. Thank you, Eclipse. I purred stressfully, massaging the bridge of my nose. You're welcome. Molly. I turned, facing my brother. Yes, Draco. He motioned a wing to the door. A griffin came by and dropped off a stack of books and scrolls. They're in the kitchen. Yes. I regained my composure. Those are Optimus's. Dune, love, could you bring them over here to the pillows? He nodded, getting up to fetch the books. After a brief moment to catch their breaths, the humans stumbled nervously to the sofa, and melted into the cushions. Hibiscus immediately bounded over to them, curling up behind the couch. Her sunny yellow scales sprinkled with pink, and she rested her head in between Maiko and Jack. Maiko took hesitation, before resting on Hib's snout. I giggled, watching them while they flipped through channels on the TV. Come on, guys. I motioned towards the bots. Nobody here will hurt you on purpose. I climbed onto Draco's back, crawling onto his head. Hey Brobro. I grinned snarkily. Hi Molly. He laughed, picking me off of his horns. Glad you decided to visit the kingdom. Me too. I bit my lip, before flopping onto the floor. But I'm tired too. Well you have us, Stingray smirked, we stress you out. You don't get sleep. Yeah, no kidding. I grunted, picking myself off of the floor. Dune was struggling to balance the books on his head, wings, forelegs and tail, as he tried to make his way to the corner. "You're an idiot," Grove scoffed, rolling her hazel eyes. "You could have just brought them over one by one. And that's why you are weaker than me," Dune growled, before falling off balance. "Whoa whoa," he yelled, before flipping over his tail. "Dune, you fool," Draco snorted, "be careful with these. I'm pretty sure if Garnet found out you were about to damage historical records, she would have your heart on a gold platter." "I wasn't about to damage them," Dune murmured, rolling onto his legs. "Sure you weren't," I mocked, sitting down on the couch. Optimus made his way to the pile, picking them up along with Draco. "I don't believe we formally met." Draco smiled, standing up straight. "I am Draco Valstrit, adopted brother to the throne and uncle to the termites over there." He tilted his head to the kids, and held out his claw. Without hesitation, Optimus took it with his servo. "Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots." They shook hands, and kept picking up the books. I smiled, "Yay! Family likes Optimus." I grinned widely, and turned back around. "Your friends are cool, Mum." Hibiscus chirped, green eyes focused on me. I nodded sweetly, petting her snout. "Good. I cooed, because you might be seeing them more often." Her royal sunniness smiled wider, her horns tinting pale pink. "Really?" "Yes." "Yay." She beamed, getting up and skipping around. Maiko, Jack, and Raph turned to me, eyes wide open. "Seriously?" they yelled, smiling in excitement. I laughed, resting my wings over the couch. "Well," I hummed, grinning back, nervously, "nobody seemed to be complaining about humans. And y'all seem to be loving it here." I thought that. "Yes!" they screamed, jumping to their feet. "Yes yes 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 yes." I laughed, excited as well. "They love it here. There will be more visits. No more homesickness." The room was full of chatter, me and the humans watching the TV with Dune and Stingray. Hibiscus, Hale and Grove were resting over Optimus's shoulder, their tails curling around each other as they read with him. Dark Tort was somewhere snoring, and Eclipse ... I guess I haven't been paying attention to her. "Molly!" I heard Ratchet yell nervously, and a gasp from the kids. "Ratchet, what did you?" I started saying, turning around and cutting myself off at the sight. The dark mass, Eclipse, was curled around Ratchet's neck, falling asleep on his shoulder. "Ratchet," I urged, jumping over the couch, "don't move." "Move and you're scarred." Dune laughed, his tail curled over his hind legs. "What do I do?" he whispered in fright, his optics widened extremely. "You," I drawled, flying up to her head. I lightly tapped her on the beak, before she swung her barbed tail at my face out of instinct. "Yeah." I winced. "She ain't getting off." "But." "Leave her be." Draco huffed. "She's cranky when she wakes up." Ratchet froze, and sat down beside Optimus, stiff as a brick. Optimus smirked at him, turning a page in a book. "I think she likes you," he joked, looking back to the page. Ratchet glared at him, relaxing his shoulder plates. Eclipse squirmed at the movement, nuzzling her head closer to her chest. Ratchet froze again in reaction. I giggled, my eyes softening. It made me happy to know my kids were taking a liking to the bots, not afraid at all. The books and scrolls were stacked carefully on top of each other next to Optimus, who was lounging against the pillows. His optics were filled with interest as they scanned every word. I was surprised, because when he got to the ones written in ancient and traditional Animalian, it looked like he understood some of it. But when Hale saw him struggling on one, he quickly helped him out. But it wasn't like most of it was Animalian. Few people spoke Animalian fluently anymore, turning over to English. "What is this one about?" I asked, leaning on the stack. "The War of Clea, I believe," Optimus answered, thoughtfully, his thumb tracing over the gold-plated lettering on the cover. I breathed in quickly, my eyes twinkling. What part?" I asked hesitantly, stroking my knuckles. He looked up to me, then back to the book. "It seems that I am reading a bit on General Erich Verhalen, the Grand General over all of Animalia's troops during the war, and second in command to Queen Clea, who I believe is your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother." I answered, counting on my fingers. "Continue." Optimus nodded, looking back to the page. "I can't believe humans and Animalians went to war." He shook his head, "And humans don't know a thing about your existence." "Keep reading," I informed, "you'll learn." I walked away, pulling my shoulders back. "Kids." Draco stood up, looking to my children. "Time to go to bed." "No." They whined, pouting. "I'm sorry," Draco nagged, "but you have had a long day at school, and your mother has had a long day outside as well." He folded his wing back. "But it's not even bedtime." Dune huffed, standing up. Draco walked over to Ratchet, carefully unwrapping Eclipse from his neck and carrying her out. Dark Tort flew from the balcony, following Draco. Grove and Hale slumped their wings, gliding down from the pillows. Hibiscus did so as well, placing a foot on the ground. "Aren't you forgetting something?" I called, putting a hand on my hip. They stopped, and bounded back to me. Hibiscus wrapped her wings around me, pecking me on the cheek. "Good night, Mum," she chirped, unwrapping her wings and walking away. Dune and Stingray wrapped their wings around me, giving me a loving hug and saying good night. Grove and Hale followed Hibiscus's lead, giving me a peck on the cheek. Dark Tort nuzzled me, before bounding back to Eclipse's side. The kids shut the door when they left, the oak door clicking. I smiled, clasping my hands together. "Molly?" Optimus questioned, optics resting on a page. "Yes," I answered, walking back towards him. "Why does General Aerith look like you?" I froze, and rushed to his side. The picture on the page showed an image of a tall, elvish woman, with braided brown hair and chartreuse eyes. She had a stern look for an expression, lips a natural pink. Her nose was straight, eyebrows thin and angled. She had 2 scars crossing each other in an X over her left eye, and one running across her jawline. In her hand was a long sword, razor-sharp with a gold handle. She was wearing brown leather armor with dark mossy green accents, a tanned wrap around her arms followed by black cloth. Behind her was a deep red dragon with gunmetal armor, claws as sharp as blades. She looked exactly like me. I gulped, blinking my eyes quickly. I haven't looked at her face in a long time. "Are you perhaps related to her?" Optimus looked to me, head tilting. "Not exactly." I spoke softly, tracing her features. Or should I say, my features. I walked away, biting my lip. I looked back to Optimus, thinking. Deciding on the thought, I headed up to my room, walking up the stairs. I turned the handle, walking into the room. I treaded over to the bedside, kneeling down to search underneath it. My hands felt a wooden trunk, and I pulled it out. It was chained up, much like the one back in the garage. It hurt just looking at it, and my other arm went to the bedside table. My hand searched blindly, before fidgeting with a metal tube. I picked it up, examining the key. It looked like an ordinary skeleton key, but it was one of a kind. I breathed in, and put the key in the padlock. It made a satisfying click and the truck popped open. I tried to avoid looking at anything in there, but my eyes caught the memories anyways. A gold music box, a small doll with a patchy skirt, a dagger and an arrow, a locket, a wood bow, and a leather-bound journal. My hand reached for the journal, pulling away jerkily. I breathed in again, my inhale hitching. I grabbed the leather cover, examining it carefully. It was stamped with a family crest, surrounded by a Celtic knot heart. I pulled it to my chest, smiling while crying. "It's been a long time," I whispered, wiping tears away. I walked out of the monarch chambers, keeping it close to my heart. I skipped steps on the stairs, smiling. I turned to Optimus, knowing he would appreciate what I was about to offer him. I approached him slowly, biting the inside of my cheek. This journal, I smiled down at it, stroking the cover, is the personal autobiography of Aerith Verhalen, written in first person. It has been gifted to me by a seer, who trusted me with it. It holds her whole story till her death. I held it out in front of me towards Optimus, looking up to him. I thought you would be interested. I grinned as he took it in his digits gently, like it was a small bird. His index finger gently touched the cover, shocked that I was offering him such a gift. Molly, he stammered, gently opening it up. Don't say anything. I hushed, glowing. I reached to the back of my neck, pressing down onto the gel-like clasp on my neck. The one that stores my nanotech armor and connects to my nervous system. I heard the clasp buzz, then the metal clanked, splitting apart the clasp. I felt the tiny bottle rise from the clasp, glowing above the lights of the inner clasp. I picked up the small bottle, closing the clasp back up. I raised the bottle to my face, examining the silver dust in it. Aerith wrote the journal in a special ink, I hummed, bringing Optimus's arm down with the book, softly stroking a piece of metal on his servo. The ink is supposed to make the writing come to life when it interacts with stardust. I popped the cork off the bottle, sprinkling the page with the dust. The words glowed gold, then settled back to a shimmering silver. Just flip the page when you're ready. I smiled, letting go of his servo. I walked back over to the couch, curling up on a longer cushion. My eyes started to flutter open and close, before I sighed in sleepiness, and fell to the succumbing sleep.
Hey guys, what's going on? Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you guys want to watch more like it, please subscribe to my channel and become part of the video game fanfiction plot. And please leave a comment down below and hit that like button. If you guys have any suggestions on any stories you guys want me to read, don't hesitate. They're always welcome here in the video game fanfic plot. That also goes for video games. Until next time, goodbye!